Welcome back, everyone. I'm Julie Flakstad, and this is the Midlife Truth Project, a special 9-part series aimed at unraveling the myriad of transitions that women face as we approach and settle into midlife. For those new to this series, consider it really an audio journey where all of the conversations build off each other. For example, we were really intentional about having this conversation on friendship matters after our conversation about sex and intimacy. Because let's be honest, right? Friendship can be as intimate as the relationships we have with spouses or partners. Not physically, but definitely emotionally. So if you missed any of our beginning episodes, we hope that you'll go back and listen. Okay, today's truth is called Friendship Matters. It's a powerful conversation about the importance of meaningful connection as we age, and the sometimes really painful reality that it takes work to build and nurture these important relationships. We'll also explore how to open up to new friendships as we continue settling into midlife. To help us explore this really important topic is my friend, life coach. Yes, she's actually my life coach, podcaster, speaker, and writer, Paige Nolan. Paige lives in LA, and she has a passionate following around the country, from all of her individual clients to her small group workshops, which are called Live What Matters, where she guides people to discover and focus on what matters most so they can truly begin to experience deeply fulfilling lives. So let's do this. Let's talk truth.
Look, as a doctor, I am always telling my patients to look for clean skincare products, but many of the additives in topical skincare actually irritate skin. Womeness is the leading women's wellness brand, modernizing aging through education, inspiration, and clean solutions formulated to meet the needs of our changing bodies. Their skincare formulas have no parabens, phthalates, and sulfates, absolutely no estrogen, phytoestrogen, or added hormones, and they're vegan and gluten-free. Their award-winning products like Overnight Magic Nighttime Repair Cream and the Works All-Over Toning Body Cream are gentle enough for everyday use and are loved by beauty editors and consumers. Created by women for women, Womeness offers clinically and doctor-tested supplements, sexual wellness, and skincare products that help you navigate through hot flashes, changing skin, vaginal dryness, sleepless nights, and more, empowering you to live your life fully and age well.
I'm going to just do like the informal bit first, just because I feel like so kind of quirky having this conversation in front of Paige, because I feel like our vernacular is similar. Like, I want to get us grounded and get us into the space and make sure our energy is flowing.
I love that, because I was actually thinking, I didn't even look at my notes again. And I want to say, Taz, it's nice to meet you and see your face. I've been loving the series. So I haven't,
I'm so
we're
glad.
jumping into this, and I need to say to you specifically, it's been awesome. I've been listening along with each episode.
So glad. I'm thrilled to meet you. I think I've seen some of your work before, and so I was super excited when Julie told me that you were joining us. So this is great.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I just want to ground everyone in what we're talking about today. And don't be surprised, Taz, if I start saying y'all, because I have a very terrible habit of picking up on other people's intonation.
My language.
And you'll hear that that Paige just has a wonderful drawl, or whatever they want to call it, so that I love. So let's start by, I just want to say welcome, Paige. I am so thrilled to have you with us. And
Thank
for
you.
everyone out there listening in listener land today, I just want to say you are in for a treat, by all means. It's wild to imagine. I'm going to start by telling our origin story. That's apparently what it's called, when friends meet. And we met, believe it or not, 3.5 years ago. And Taz, you're going to love this because you interview so many people. Paige and I were together in an interview that I hosted in conjunction with a different series that I was producing called Being 50ish. And it was in the middle of COVID, and it was a really special, beautiful conversation. It was, I think looking back, I was so drawn to you, Paige, because of the reflections that you gave and the analogies, on different ideas. And some of those analogies have really stuck with me today, and I still use them with other people. So thank you for that. And I loved your energy. I felt so grounded in that conversation, in fact, that I called you. I hope you remember, I called you a few weeks later and I asked you to be my life coach.
Yes.
And you said yes. And here we are.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was really special. This has been a special relationship. So I am just thrilled that you're here and to help us unpack friendship and all that it means. But before we get started, I want to, today's truth is called Friendship Matters. But before we get started, I would love for you to explain to listeners who may not be as familiar with life coaching, how you work and who might potentially benefit from this type of work.
Thank you for all of that. I'm so delighted to be here. I just have had a smile on my face the past 24 hours because Friendship Matters just makes you smile because we all know how much it does. So thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. So I'm going to give y'all the answer that I heard when I was first entering life coaching. And I feel like my now perspective of life coaching versus therapy has changed a little bit and evolved. When you're first out there trying to decide to work with a therapist, a healer, a life coach, whoever is going to help you in your life, you'll hear a lot about life coaching being about a goal. It's time specific. It can often be short term. It's about the future, not the past. All of those things are true. You're going to hear about therapy being rooted in mental health, which it is. Therapy is a regulated system that trained therapists are licensed. They're coming through the framework of theory. And I believe in all that. What I've now learned I guess I've been doing it, I think 15 years. It's all kind of morphing. I now call us helping professionals because we overlap in so many ways. And I think there was a big deal made about the difference between coaches and therapists because coaches are trying to find their place. It's a very new field. We're still trying to find our place. But, I talk to my friends. I have clients who are working with marriage counselors or therapists in addition to getting coaching from me. And I hear what therapists and traditional psychoanalysts are saying, and it overlaps with coaching so much. And so I think a big part of this is the relationship that you can experience with the person who's guiding you. We're all in this field together. If you're in this field, you want to help people solve problems. You want to help people grow and develop. You want them to experience more fulfillment in their life. You want them to be more at peace. And the single most important factor in all that is the trust that you can build with the person. Can you be in that vulnerable conversation? Can you tell the truth? I don't know if you've ever had a friend say, I just bullshitted my therapist today.
Yeah, all the time. Yeah,
and so you really want to be partnered with somebody who can meet you where you are and create that psychological safety to come forward. And what I personally love about coaching is I am very goal oriented. My mom is a retired therapist. I've done traditional therapy before I started getting into the field of coaching. So I had been exposed to a lot of different ways that you could work with patients and clients and with people. And for me, coaching really fit because it felt more free. Another distinction that I think psychotherapy has made is a lot of rules and norms around how the therapist behaves. And the therapist is supposed to be completely neutral. I'm not neutral, Julie, as you know. If I'm in a coaching relationship and I have a strong point of view about my client's behavior or my client's spouse's behavior, I'm going to take that stance. I'm going to stand up for my point of view. And if I want to hug a client after a session, I hug a client after a session. And I think that's kind of changing between therapists and coaches. We're all kind of in it together. But I think that's one of the things historically that, psychotherapy has had that kind of label of it's more rigid and it can be clinical. And to me, I found that to be a little bit true. I am more free to move around. And last thing I'll say is I'm not limited to a mental framework. I'm not limited to a theory. I don't do EFT. I don't do CBT. I can pop around and kind of go with what I think is going to best serve a client. But I have to say therapists can do that too.
It's so interesting because I get the same question in the exam room because the exam room is clinical, right? It's like data and lab and, interpretation and explanation. I feel like I talk a lot. There's a lot of explanation, but then people have to go home, with the information that I've given them. So I've always, because there's a lot of like, why do I need a coach? Like, I'll figure this out myself, But when you go home and you're with yourself and your thoughts and your life and your partners and whatever else, that's where like the rubber hits the road. And I feel like that's where coaches really matter. So I wonder if it's sort of that same kind of dialogue there, that you need a coach to get through the day-to-day of life, because theory and clinical data and all of that is great, but it still has to be really practical. So I don't know if you make all of this super practical,
Again, the word coach means that you're held accountable, right? And so I think from a client perspective, what I have gained the most is feeling a sense of accountability to the conversations that we've had, to some of the goals that we've set, the behaviors that I want to practice. And so I also really enjoy, for anyone out there who might be considering this, is your ability to kind of be flexible also in the cadence of the work. So, you can dive into something for 6 months, then you can walk away for 6 months. And so there's a lot of fluidity to it. So, okay, I'm going to pause this there and keep on going because we have a lot to get to.
Yes.
I want to go deep right away from the start when we talk about this episode about friendship matters. And what's interesting is that when in prepping for this, both Taz and I had a conversation, and we found that we both actually struggle with friendship in different ways. And I know that many women do. I know the women that you work with do as well, Paige. Paige. And so especially when it comes to conflict and communication, right? And that's not surprising, because if you think about it, our culture in many ways values romantic relationships more than it does platonic ones, in that we have, so many more tools and podcasts and books and therapists and even movies, right? That show us, how to act in those relationships, but we don't have that same type of support in friendship. And so I want to start off the conversation with just your perspective on how friendship shifts as we, move into our 40s and our 50s versus our 20s and our 30s. What does that look like for you in the work you do?
I think it definitely shifts 100%. And I think it is, to your point, essential. And it's not, as I'm going to add, psychologically studied. We actually don't have a ongoing conversation about how to sustain and create healthy friendships as much as we have a conversation around romantic love, books written, and actually psychological studies around romantic love. I think friendship is a newer field, and I think COVID kind of really sparked an interest in it. So it's really talked about now, and it's getting funded. So we're going to be better supported moving forward in how to create and sustain healthy relationships. Absolutely, the cycle of friendship is a real thing, and there's loss inherent in that. So I'm bad about remembering a study, but I just heard the other day that every 7 years, the group of people with whom you spend the most time shifts. And I was wondering, I didn't read the extent of the study, but when I heard it in passing, I was thinking, I wonder if that's related to the age of our children, because I know that's been true in my life. I've chosen to get married and have children. And the cycle of people with whom I'm spending a lot of time often reflects the age of my children. So I think that's part of it in family life. That shift is part of it. Another big thing that happens in friendship is your own life transitions will impact how you show up in those friendships. So, for example, in my coaching world with clients, if they're going through a divorce, that can change friendship. If they're going through cancer treatments, that can change friendship. When you move locations, you could move neighborhoods, you could move out of the state. So then it becomes, can this particular friendship, can I stay close to this person? All the things that used to connect us before are now shifting and changing. So what is our connection? What is it based on? And so I do find that there can be a shift, there can be changes, and we don't talk about how hard that is. We don't really have a space in an ongoing conversation in our culture at large around grief. And if we do, it's a big loss. It's like someone died, or there's grief personally in our life around health loss or career change or financial loss. I think there's a real loss. There's an undercurrent of when you used to be close with someone, and you see that person and you could see them physically, or you could see them on social media with somebody else, or see a photograph or have a memory of that person, and you miss those years that you were close with that person. I think that's a real thing. It's people need to talk about it. They need to think about it. I've had coaching and relationship conversations about that kind of thing. And so that could speak to kind of the subtlety, but absolutely we move in cycles.
It matters the whole, I have a 16-year-old daughter. We've talked about it before on the show. So does Julie. And it's been interesting to watch her navigate friends and friendship. And it's so important for her and for her, mental health and for her well-being to have those people. But then I feel like once we get married and move on and start a family, like we forget how important that was to us, right? And then we land in our 40s and our 50s. And many women don't have friends, right? They have superficial friends or they have acquaintances, but they don't have like that group like that's going to fight for them. And, why do you think that it's maybe more important for us to be really dialed into friendship in our 40s and 50s versus, our teens and our 20s,
A friendship matters because it keeps you alive, literally. It is so happy and fun and joyful and uplifting to spend time with friends. I mean, doesn't it make you want to smile? I mean, like it's the happiest.
When they are the right friends.
Right, when they are the right friends.
I mean, you can feel very lonely in the wrong company.
In that framework of like, why does it matter? It keeps us healthier. It keeps us supported. When we talk about resilience, resilience is not about this, I'm super brave and courageous and I can meet everything. Resilience is when the hard stuff happens, how do I rise? And when the hard stuff happens and we rise to the occasion, we often do that because we're lifted up by our support group. And our friends are there when we're wobbling through something that's unsteady. So it matters for health reasons, for joy, for positivity. It gives you a hit of positive emotion. And, in our 40s and 50s, why it really matters is because that's when life actually can change unexpectedly, and to your point, Taz, about, why it's harder. I think it's harder because the two things that I think are hallmarks of cultivating really close friendships are time and vulnerability. And so in the middle of your life, you are a little bit more crunched for time. You might have children who need you to drive them around. I mean, that was the hardest for me with the preteen years because you're just driving and driving and driving. And then when your child can drive himself or herself or get rides, just more independence, that kind of opens you up a little bit more. And then when children, leave your home, that opens you up a little bit more. But in your 40s, and I'm saying this respectfully, honoring that people have children at all different ages. But, in that middle, sometimes the 40s line up with a child around that age where you're really invested and you're really committed to that child's development and their social group. So I think time is a big barrier. And then when we talk about, the heartbreak of the middle passage, aging parents, things that are changing with your health, things that might be changing financially. And then when I say financially, it's not just financial insecurity. It could be a windfall, and then it's like, okay, well, how do I manage this? Are my friends going to be happy for me? How do I feel about this financial change in my circumstances? And how will this impact how I spend my time? If you get a financial windfall, maybe you're going to start traveling more. And if you have a group of friends that can't keep up with you financially, maybe they'll feel left out because you're going to go do these fun things they can't afford to do. So I think managing those transitions and changes, it requires vulnerability. And when you go to a close friend with your inner life, that's a big question mark. Are they going to be able to hold space for you? Are they going to be able to meet you there? Are they going to be able to not judge you and just listen? Just listen. And I'll add this to that. The 20s and 30s, and then I want to hear your question, Julie, but the 20s and 30s, especially the teens and 20s, you're in a shared circumstance. You're going to school together. You're sharing life together, these little bits of life. Like when I think about my college friends, it's like just making food together, just walking to class together. There's so much consistency and common ground in your lives. And then as you differentiate and you partner and then you have children and you're in these individual homes, your lives are so busy and your primary focus is keeping that family unit very strong and well defined. It's really difficult to have the common ground, the times where you're like, just get the giggles together for no reason, sitting in the car in the driveway.
I want to go back for 1 second about the shift, because I think there's one point that I hear from the women that I've interviewed is that this time in our kind of mid to late 40s, 50s is almost a time of also reckoning. It is a moment when you really, begin to wonder, who are my people? And you're less apt to want to deal with the bullshit, just to put it out there. You don't want the facade, and so you'd rather be, sometimes alone than in bad company. And so I think that there's a shift that happens there. That's one thing I wanted to say. And I also wanted to talk to, the women who are not married and that do not have children and who embrace their friends as their family. So it's not their biological family, but it is their family. And so in no uncertain terms. And thus friendship takes on a whole new level of importance, as well as in a divorce situation and an empty nest situation where you're not attached to your family in the same way. So I think friendship, again, it mushrooms, right, in terms of its importance. We know that it breeds, there's an epidemic of loneliness going on. There's actually a study that I had heard in a podcast with, I think it was Johan Hari, who wrote Lost Connections. He said 41% of Americans don't feel like anybody knows them well.
Yeah.
That is staggering, right? And so this conversation is a rallying cry to really say, wow, this is important. We know it breeds longevity. We know it breeds happiness. So how are we going to work on it? And then the last thing I wanted to say is I also think that as much as life gets messier as we age, there's also really things to celebrate, right? There's marriage and there's birth and there's all these wonderful things that are going to happen. And so to take time now to really nurture and foster these relationships will breed that tribe, that cabinet of ministers that hopefully can be with us for the long run, right?
One of the things I noticed along the lines of just time and how to really hold space for someone and be with someone is how diluted our attention gets. So whether you're doing family life or, to your point, Julie, whatever kind of life you're living, I think it's a matter of social energy that we have, being connected to our devices and staying in touch with people who don't live in our immediate physical environment. So you're keeping in touch with family members who live away from you. You're keeping in touch with your forever friends who live in different cities and states, different time zones. So I find in my own life and also when I talk to women about their lives, it's exhausting. So at the end of the day, with all these touch points of social touch points, even news cycles that you're keeping up with, you just want to collapse and space out, and you don't make that effort. Or if you do run into a friend at a restaurant that night, your attention span it's just a little shorter than it would be if you hadn't been keeping up with all the things you have to keep up with. And so I think that's something to invite people to be aware of in their present day, relationships. If you want to get closer with someone, give them your undivided attention. It can be for a shorter period of time, but the fact that it's undivided and engaged and you're actively listening to someone, that is like gold in today's environment. I mean, that's pure intimacy.
I hear that all the time, Paige, from, the women that I work with and get to meet on a regular basis. And even personally, I think I've been honest that I've experienced this, is that it's not just family life. I think if you're in a career or you're building a business or, you're taking care of aging parents or, there's so many things that occupy our time and attention. I've sat with women who, when I ask this question, what does your community look like? Who's your social, and I'm not talking about your partner, who is your social support beyond that, and most women have trouble, the majority, I would say, have trouble answering that question. They'll talk about their sisters, maybe their mom, and every now and then a woman will say, I have this fabulous group of girlfriends. We meet X amount of times per year, or I have a Bible study or a book club or things like that. But honestly, it's the minority. And I know that's surprising, but it really is, because some women are just busy, and the career toll is a toll too, and it takes away from that energy to like engage. I mean, I've been there. Like, I don't want to talk to anybody. I'm like collapsed out on the couch. I'm like, I'm done. And it's my husband who's like, it's so-and-so's birthday. Did you like call? I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot, And so, so I've been right there with so many of those people who feel like that, that we're just spent, we're done, So I think that's one issue that I hear over and over again, and curious, like what your thoughts are there. And then the other is just a comment. The 7 years is something. In Eastern systems of wisdom and medicine, they believe that you spiritually evolve every 7 years. They believe that there is a shift. And, that even the chakra system, not to get too woo-woo, is tied to sort of this number 7 and the evolution that we go through with 7-year shifts. So it's interesting that the research plays out that way too. I just find that interesting. So that's just a comment on that.
And it's biblical, right? The world is created in 7 days.
That's
7 days.
Cool. There we go. It all kind of matches up together. But what do women like that do? Is it a matter of like, we'll find the time and make the time, commit to the time? Like, what's something practical that somebody like that can do to sort of preserve friendships, maintain friendships, kind of like, not make sure that aspect, which I think is an aspect of health, make sure that aspect of health is not neglected.
I think it's intentionality. And Julie, you and I have talked about this so much. It's getting very intentional around how you spend your time and cultivating those moments. You need a lot of touch points. You need a lot of moments to build trust with another individual. And I find that if you choose something achievable, like a small, like you said, Taz, a book club or a Bible group, like that's achievable. Like once a month you're going and you're learning together. That to me is much more, you can wrap your brain around that. You can plan for that. You can protect the time, as opposed to you're just scrolling through social media and everybody seems to have these adorable pictures with their friend group and they just went to the beach together, or they just went to a football game together, or whatever it is. And you think, I don't even have that. I have no friends, and then we get into a rabbit hole of it seems so big. Everybody else has this going on, or your perception is that everybody's connected and you're the odd woman out or the odd person out. And for me, it's about making it small, little by little, planning things, protecting that time. I really do feel like cultivating closeness and friendship takes initiation. You do have to initiate. And if that means looking at your calendar on a Sunday and saying, okay, maybe it's not this week, but it's the next week, I know I want to do something with a girlfriend. You have to think about it. You have to be intentional about it. Otherwise, we're just drinking in this fire hose of information coming through our device, coming from our careers, coming from our family relationships, our obligations. And you're not having a break, in your time or in your day without taking a break. So yeah, I think you said it. You have to take it. You have to take the time. You have to decide that it's that important.
Well, and I want to add to that. Like, I think two things. I think there's tremendous value in not only taking the time, like you said, Paige, and saying this is the date and this is what I'm doing, but it's also showing up, right? Like, how many times have people canceled on you? So not just showing up, but also getting into the mindset before you show up and like getting excited about like seeing that person, and you said it earlier, and to be there with them and actively listen and show them that you kind of love them, and that you value their time that they have come. I think so often, it's like our teenagers, like people show up, they're coming in hot, they're scrolling on their phone, they're not really there. So I've been trying to think more about that. And I also want to add, and I want you to talk about this, Paige, because this has, it's had a profound impact on me. I want to talk about intentionality in terms of first taking inventory. And this is so transformative. I have found in my own life, I have found it in others. I have had people respond to pieces that I've written about it, is really taking a pause in midlife to take an inventory of our friendships, to understand, who is important to us. So can I ask you to talk about the garden and the analogy that you shared with me the first time we met?
I'm a huge proponent of doing this, and I do it every year because I always say I have a December birthday and we have a new year in January. So I get a double whammy of goal sheets and lists and get so excited for a new calendar year and a new year of my life. And so I started doing this a few years ago before I met you, Julie, and then I brought it to the table the last time we had done that panel together. And it's looking at the people in your life and seeing them as serving different purposes. And the analogy that I used is the garden, that there are people in your life who are oak trees, and these are friends for life. They're deeply rooted. Oftentimes they've met your family of origin. There's nothing more beautiful than a friend who has known your parents and your siblings, and they know the different dogs that your family had, and they know the quirks of just your childhood, those really enduring friendships. And I also want to say an oak tree friend doesn't only come through your younger years. You can meet an oak tree friend later in your life, but there are some who go with you through your lifeline. And that's why I love that analogy around the oaks too, because I'm born and raised in New Orleans, and they endure all the storms. It's one of the most beautiful things about that city, with everything that city has gone through. And you can still drive down St. Charles Avenue and see these overarching oak trees. And then there's the flower group, and the flower friends in your life are absolutely beautiful, and they bloom exactly at the time that you need them. I think of these as people who you've met through your career path at different stages of your career path. They're people with whom you've learned side by side. Maybe you were a student at one point. They're people who come in through your children. They're mom friends. They're friends that you meet at sporting events. They're friends in your neighborhood. And then there's the weeds. We got to love the weeds, though.
We know who they are.
Yeah, we know who they are. And they grow in everybody's garden. You can't have a garden without weeding your garden. So, yeah, and they grow from nutrients. I mean, they are a life form. They're not awful. They're there for a minute. You just have to prune. You have to get in there and you have to clean things out. And when you start to notice that it's no longer reciprocal, that's one of the things that I think is true of this inventory and taking assessment. It's looking at these relationships and saying, is this mutually beneficial? Am I getting as much as I give? Or has this turned really toxic? Is this a parasite situation? And I'm literally, you can feel like someone is eating your soul. You're like, I can't give anymore. I can't, so I think that idea of boundaries, creating distance, it may or may not be worth a hard conversation. I help people a lot make that decision. Like, is this worth a hard conversation? How will this conversation be received? Because sometimes you just know you're going to go there. They're not going to understand what you're upset about. And, it could just be that you create distance, and that means letting it fade out. I do think it's really important to have hard conversations with friends.
Yeah.
And it's so terrifying to do it. But every time I've experienced that personally or helped someone through that, there is closeness on the other side. And if you don't find closeness on the other side, there is some growth, and you can and you do outgrow people, and that's okay.
Well, that kind of goes with the idea of, intimacy in friendships, right? Versus intimacy in a relationship. Some of these themes overlap for sure. When you're willing to have that hard conversation with a friend, then you're willing to be vulnerable, and you're willing to kind of put the armor away for a second and to really reveal your soul. That takes a certain amount of guts to do that, right? And hopefully, just like a relationship, or a partner relationship, everything grows from that point and becomes better and stronger, right? And more deeper and more meaningful. But what if it doesn't? And then how do those two scenarios differ? Like, how is it different, a hard conversation different with a friend versus with a partner? How is intimacy different with a friend versus a partner?
I just think we're not shown a lot of models of what those intimate, difficult conversations look like with friendship. You're shown so much in storytelling, in books and movies. You've seen your parents for better or worse, or you've seen other people's parents for better or worse. I think a lot of the images that we're shown of friendship is very romanticized. It's like, she's my bestie and she reads my mind and we never have any conflict. And so you feel like you're failing if you're not living up to this Thelma and Louise, we're going to go off the cliff together. And I think it's just courage. You don't know how it's going to go. But I think if you get intentional about it, if you're self-reflective, if you understand your part in it and you're taking responsibility for your experience, it's not you've been distant. It's that we have a distance between us. And this is the way I've been feeling. I think that's kind of a rule I feel like in difficult conversations is you have to keep it with I. If you come at it like you're blaming the other person, it's like, I just don't like the way you are. It's not going to go over. You know what I mean? It's like, you just have been sucking lately. That's not, what can the person say? So you really have to be self-reflective. And at the end of the day, that's the gift of it, is that through every relationship, you are going to expand and grow your capacity for love and compassion. You and you. You're the only person who lives with you your entire life. Of all the people with whom you have great conversations, you're the one in conversation the most with you. So even if that friendship dissolves or fades out, I think it's still an invitation for us to say, what did I learn about me? What was the blessing in this? What can I be grateful for? Every relationship is a mirror for us to see another aspect of ourselves. And then you take what you've learned from that and you have it expand your heart. And guess what? You become a better friend to different people. It's just, it wasn't working out with that person at that time.
I think also one of the beautiful things with taking inventory, although it sounds very clinical, I do think that there was an exercise that I did prior to taking inventory in my late 40s when I really was being intentional. And I'll put it out there. I was having a really hard time. I felt super lonely in my late 40s. It was a difficult time for me because my oak trees didn't live near me. And I felt like I wasn't seen or being seen or saw, I really questioned, who are my people? Like, who are the people I can be 100% authentic with, that I can say anything to without judgment, that would be there day or night, like that were right in my immediate zone. And because of all the reasons we've already talked about, people had moved away or people had grown apart or there were just people that I didn't feel like I could have a different opinion from, to be quite honest, because I felt like that would be maybe too aggressive for them. And so I wonder, Chip Connolly said in episode 1, he said that this middle place, what he called middle essence, often mirrors adolescence, because there are some same situations, right? Of like not feeling necessarily comfortable with where one is or who one's people are and how to find them. And so I wonder, I just want to make sure that we have time to really hone in on this. Like, how do we communicate in those tough situations? Like, can you give us some insight and some tools, like more about how to, if you have these oak trees or these flowers that you want to invest time in, that you want to, I guess more the oak tree side or a sapling, I draw the analogy way out there. The sapling that you want to create into an oak tree, and you're in a moment, what are some communication tools?
I think first and foremost, I'm just a believer of this around communication always, is let love lead. Make sure you're feeding the part of the relationship that is the best part, that is the connection part. So it's the same thing that I would tell somebody who's coming to me for how to have a difficult conversation with a romantic partner or a spouse. It's like, do you go to dinner and say, we need to talk about our connection? Or do you go to dinner and have a nice meal that's connecting? So be in the space of the connection. So when you talk about a sapling, for example, make sure you're really feeding the places where that relationship can grow. So is it a person who's really interested in the same things you're interested in? Is it a person who's pursuing the same kind of professional path? Or maybe you have a similar sense of humor and you just have a lot of fun together and you love to laugh with that person. It's like making sure that it's balanced. If the part that's hard and the part that's out of balance, you feel a lack there. You want to make sure that you're not leading with the lack every time you see the person. It's being very grateful and invested in what you do have, and then building the goodwill so that when you do go to say the request that you're going to make, and that's another way that I'm answering this question, is to make sure that you have a request. You know, a hard conversation is going to lead into some sort of change. And so the request is, I really want more time with you. You know, can we have a date where it's just the two of us going to get coffee once a month? Or I notice when I talk about my marriage and you switch really quickly to your marriage, I feel like I haven't gotten everything that I want to share. I haven't said all the things. And then when I'm switching to what you need to share, I'm not feeling supported. Can we be aware of that? You know, these conversations are so difficult to have. I mean, I always tell people, Julie, you know this too, I like write in your journal. I'm a big write it down. I'm a big fan of write a letter that you don't necessarily send, but get your thoughts out in some sort of way, even verbalizing it. Like my husband speaks out loud to himself all the time. Full conversations with a difficult email he has to send. Oh, yeah. And I have heard, Taz, that that's a sign of intelligence. So we should tell our guys
I will pass that on. The kids
Talk
and I
about
make fun
building
of ours
goodwill.
all the time. You know, so anyhow.
But some people are more verbal. So maybe you have to practice the conversation out loud in the shower, in your car. I love writing. I think writing and keeping a journal or getting your thoughts down on paper is so practical. It's so inexpensive. You have paper in your home. You have a pencil and a pen. Yeah. So it's really knowing what you want to come out of the conversation. You know, it's not just, hey, you hurt my feelings and I'm right and you're wrong. It's, I sense a distance between us, or maybe there is an actual injury. Maybe there is an insult that passed between the two of you, or maybe it's just distance, or maybe it's just a desire for you to take the person's temperature and say, hey, I want to be closer to you. You know, but you have to do the reflection about what you want to come of that.
I love that somebody said to me, so I had written this article about friendship and I referenced the analogy page and somebody said to me, I went and I told my oak tree that they were my oak tree. I'm going to cry. And the friend was like so moved by having been acknowledged and seen as an oak tree. And it really and the woman said, I just want you to know because I want to like nurture our relationship even more. And I want to spend more time together. And I want to make room for that because that's how much I care about you. And so I thought that was really beautiful also, that it's not always the hard conversation. Sometimes it's also saying, I really value you and I really love spending time with you and I'd love to do more of it.
What about, Paige, when we're the problem? So just to give you a quick example, that sometimes for whatever reason, in fact, I was talking to a woman about this today. She's the eldest child. She's taking care of everybody always in her, you know, childhood home and her parental home. Same for me. I've shared that before. And it's almost like in our friendships, we end up falling into the same pattern, you know, where we're the fixer, we're the problem solvers, you know, we're the ones that, you know, everyone runs to or comes to. And at some point that gets exhausting too, you know, like you want someone to just be like, I'm having a really bad day. I'm really upset. You know, this person did X, Y, and Z to me, or my kid or my husband or my colleague or whatever, you know. But when you start to look around, you're like, I set this pattern up. I did this. I set this like kind of pattern up of being this person in this group of friends, right? How do I break out of it? And, you know, it's almost like sometimes it takes a while to realize that you've set these patterns up. And it could be the other patterns too, that, you know, you're the narcissist in the group. Like it has to be about you all the time, or the attention or the spotlight always has to go in one direction. How does a friend relationship or a friend group break out of that?
I call it the second thought. Number one is that you have to be aware. So if you're aware enough that you've even had that reflection that you just talked about, so it's like, I'm now aware that I'm the one fixing. Well, my first thought and my first inclination is to fix. And that's, back to our original point of like, what's the value of therapy and coaching in any of those relationships? It's like to help you get aware of your early coping mechanisms, of kind of the early origin story of who you were and how you functioned in a family and how you learned to be in relationship. So it's very instinctive. You're going to go there on autopilot. It's often unconscious until you're aware of it. So if that's the first thought, what's the second thought? And there's no magic potion to get you to the second thought. It's a deep breath. It's somatic awareness. Am I tight? I want to jump in. I want to have the solution right now. I mean, in my case, I want to coach someone. Give me the problems, everybody. I'll be the first one to stay on the phone for an extra hour with a friend when I should be preparing for a client call. But if a friend calls me in between and I'm called into the role of coaching a friend, that's my first thought. Like, that's my happy place. But my second thought, if that's not working in the relationship for myself or for the other person, because it doesn't always help the other person to fix, they need to rise up and figure out their own path. The second thought would be, I have to live through that discomfort of not playing that role. And so then it becomes, can I get off the phone gracefully, respectfully, naturally? Just find a way to have a boundary there. And then I think to the other point of, how do you change the whole dynamic in the group? I don't think you change it by verbalizing it. I think you change it by emphasizing when there's glimpses of shift. So, for example, if you're usually the fixer and somebody else in the group rises to that role or checks on you for a change, you emphasize that to the person. You're especially grateful. You explicitly say how that made you feel. And so that you're starting to change the nature of the group by what you give attention to. What you give attention to is going to grow. You're going to grow that dynamic, to stick with our garden analogy. You're going to grow it when you tend to it, when you turn the soil, when you water it, when you give it light. So think about bringing light to something. It means verbalizing it and pausing on it and saying, that felt really good when you checked on me. I'm usually the one checking on everybody else. I'm so glad that you checked on me. Because when you tell somebody that, it's, Julie's, back to your point about you telling the oak tree that she's an oak tree, or that example, they just sit up a little bit straighter. It's like, oh, I did that. Everybody wants to be a good friend. We don't want to be awful people. I really do feel that people, it's our nature. We're wired to be social creatures. We know that we need each other, and we don't realize how much we hurt each other. So I think when you really take that extra moment to acknowledge your friend, to validate their efforts, to say how that made you feel, you're then saying, do more of that. And so you're feeding you're feeding the love. You're not feeding the fear. I also think it's just really difficult to verbalize a group dynamic. It's way more practical and effective for you to choose allies in the group. If you have a big friend group and you're trying to navigate all the different relationships there, it's just too big. Whereas if you look at your friend group and you say, who could I be closer in this group? Who's a potential ally here for me? Who in this group do I feel like I could be more vulnerable with? And you cultivate that connection, it's going to change the whole group dynamic.
I've seen settings too, Paige, where like if a group of women are together and a couple of them, this is just to bring divorce up, but I'm sure it plays out in other scenarios, like one or two of them get divorced, that over time, the majority of women in that group end up getting divorced. Is there something to that? Like, that type of friendship or the influence of that type of friendship? I don't know if there's research behind it. I don't even, I don't know what you think of some of that dynamic.
I don't know the research behind it. I do think that there's different group philosophies or reasons. Well, let me say it this way. I think there's different reasons why groups become very close. And I do think there's a world in which very, very close girlfriends, if they're spending that much time in a close group of girlfriends, they're not spending time with their spouses. And there's no judgment there. It's just the way people are spending their time. Whereas somebody else who places an emphasis on the marriage is maybe not taking girlfriend trips. Maybe when they have a week off from their job, they're going to take a trip with their husband. So I wonder if we were in a stats class right now, or if we knew how to pull the lens back and look at, statistical relevance, how relevant is that? It could be like just statistically that women who are spending time in that kind of group are maybe not experiencing the same level of closeness with their spouses. So then it kind of echoes through the group that people are splitting up.
I also think, though, that it's important to at least hold space for the idea that it doesn't have to be a group.
Oh,
I
yeah.
had to let go. I had to let go of the
Same,
tribe
Julie.
mentality years ago, because I realized I didn't have one where I lived, but I did have some strong saplings that that I have decided to invest in, and not, of course, can there be rooms to come together every so often? Yes, but I have found, at least for myself personally, and that's neither here nor there, that these individual relationships have served me better because they don't have to function as a group. I can be interested in Taz because of what Taz, the colors that she has and the light that she has and the conversations that we have one-on-one versus the group dynamic. But that being said, I don't believe that friendships can grow and that really flourish for the long run, for the long haul, without having hard conversations periodically.
Yeah.
I just don't think, and I wonder if maybe they don't last for more than 7 years because you're not having the hard conversation. But that all being said, is there a way to say, I value you so much, this is an uncomfortable conversation, but I want to invest in our relationship, so I'm willing to have it, even though it feels super awkward.
Yeah, I actually like that, by the way. What you just said, I think is a great way to start a conversation.
Learned it from you, probably. No, I learned it probably from you, but I wonder, is that a way to go forward? Because I want people listening to feel empowered to be able to take their friendships to the next level in a way that at least leads with promise and gratitude.
I think the key to that is by starting the conversation with the intention of connection. The reason I'm having this conversation is because I love you and I want to be closer. I want to figure this distance out. I want us to trust each other, and I want to enjoy the best possible friendship that I can. When you lead with what the good outcome is, it's so different from leading with, you wronged me. I'm blaming you for this. You hurt my feelings. Yes, it's important for us to verbalize hurt feelings. It is important. And betrayal is one of the things I find in my coaching practice. Betrayal is one of the reasons that friendships fall apart. And with women in particular, we are navigating through, our power. How do we get power? How do we wield power? Through inclusion and exclusion. And we also do this not just with invitations to physically spending time with each other, but we do this with information. So a friend can get her feelings hurt because she wasn't told the news of something difficult in that friend's life, but she hears the news from somebody else. So, that can feel like a betrayal. And so if you want to go have a conversation with someone who you felt, in your mind, you thought you were so close, and then you hear through the grapevine that she's going through a divorce, or she's about to move, or whatever it is you hear, then it's like, okay, I need to have a conversation with that person. But if you lead with, why didn't you tell me? I thought we were closer. You're immediately inviting the defenses. You're immediately putting that person on edge and in the position to defend herself. And so I think that's the key to a really difficult conversation is to get above who's right and who's wrong. It's not me against you. It's us against the distance we feel. It's us against the betrayal that happened. So you point to the third thing. Yeah.
I want to go back to that woman who has had a major life transition, whether it's, divorce or a new job or leaving a job or a windfall or whatever it is. And she let go for whatever reasons of her community, her friend community. She let go of the oaks, the flowers, she's just let go of it. She's been too absorbed in everything else. How does she start to rebuild or find a friend? Like, how do you make friends when you're 50 or 48 or 55? Like, where do you go? Like, what do you do? What's advice that you have for those women?
I definitely start with an interest. I think that's learning together is very bonding. If you think about it, that's the way we made our first friends. You make your friends in school. You might have made a friend or two in the neighborhood. A lot of us had our first experiences with friendship in a learning environment. There's something very vulnerable about learning as an adult. The nature of curiosity is that you don't know what's going to happen on the other side of what you find out. So if you have a shared interest, if you are taking a class, if you're taking a book club, if you, whatever you like, so pursuing an interest and then finding someone to do that with you, I think is a great way to do it. I also think just your proximity, your neighborhood, the space, the friendly faces that you see, interacting with people, being open-hearted and open-minded to people. It's amazing how much our social networks overlap. You might end up meeting someone in Nashville and they have a cousin's brother's best friend, former neighbor who used to live in your area in Los Angeles. I mean, that's how it works. Don't you guys find that with your friends?
Yeah, all the time. Yep.
Social networks are such a web and they're so overlapping. So just to be open to the people around you, I think there's a lot of treasures hiding in plain sight wherever you have transitioned to, whether that's a move, whether that's a lifestyle change, sobriety. I've worked with people who've gotten sober, so they really have to change friend groups. You can't hang out with people who are still drinking all the time if you're not drinking, at least not at first. So finding different places to go and really making eye contact and getting in these conversations with people.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Eye contact and the smile.
True. The smile is everything. Yeah. All of that points back to just being present. That's what our friendships need. Our friendships need our undivided attention. And we are living in a world where time is a crunch. There's so much to do. We have these full heaping plates. But when you are engaged with a friend and when you are wanting to cultivate closeness in a relationship, giving it your undivided attention, making eye contact, holding space for the thing that the person is going to say, and receiving that without judgment, just listening and letting that person share their inner life. There's nothing more loving than that. It's such a beautiful gift to people.
I have to add, I mean, I'm really struck by what you just said because it's reminiscent of the conversation we had with Kelly Corrigan about being brave and showing up for our families. And love is to be brave, where she said the bravest thing you can say is tell me more.
Yeah.
Go on. Those 3 questions of really sitting, holding space and being present and it doesn't have to be a family member. In this case, it's a friend who we value.
A friend doesn't have to be your age. I think we put those barriers up too, that if you're 40, you can't be friends with somebody who's 50 or 60. And if you're 50, you can't be friends with someone who's 30. Like, a friend can cross the spectrum. I think it's, again, shared interest and, shared enthusiasm for life. It doesn't have to be somebody right in your age or right in your stage necessarily. At least that's been my experience. Is that fair to say?
Oh my gosh. Pickleball is creating miracle connections all
love
across the
pickleball.
world. Are you kidding?
Yes.
I mean, one of my closest friends who I just adore is in her 40s. She's never been married. She's never had kids. and she's super into pickleball now, and she has friends and they're in their late 50s and friends younger, and this pickleball team is like taking over the nation, and it's created so much joy and purpose and connection in her life. It's just amazing to see. So a shared interest and joy. I mean, what brings you joy? Whatever brings you joy, whatever your answer is, there's hundreds and thousands and maybe millions of other people who have that same joy. You know, look at us. We're all in the podcasting world. I love a great podcast. I love talking to people about podcasts. Millions of people listen to podcasts. You know, so just following what lights you up and trusting that you will find other people who have that same enthusiasm and that joy, and that you're likable. You know, if you're interested in it and you ask a person about their interests, you become interesting. You know, if you like someone, they're more likely to like you back. It's that thing. I'm a big dog person, if y'all have dogs. And so I spend a lot of time at the dog park. So when a dog runs up to me at the dog park, or when a dog runs up to one of my kids or my husband, your first thought is, oh, that dog likes you. It's just an automatic thought. And then what happens? You automatically like that dog more. It's just so primal, you know? So I think we're all very much more likable than we probably give ourselves credit for. But if you put the energy out there of liking someone else, you become more attractive, you know, and you get liked back.
And I will just sprinkle in there, because ever since I drank the Kool-Aid on vulnerability, I just can't seem to stop, because I realized that my people, when I ask myself, who are my people are vulnerable. My people go there. My people can cry, you know, and my people, anyway, I can go on with who my people are. But I think that ability to share, even in small increments, and see what you get back, is a real welcome mat to finding the right people. Because you'll know instantly if you're like, you know, I'm feeling X, Y, and Z, and you put that out there and you see how they receive it, you're going to know right away, right? So I could talk forever. I love this. But I'm going to ask you a question as we kind of move to close is, Paige, what is your midlife truth?
Life takes a lot more intention than I realized. I think I took things for granted before the middle of my life. I've always had a lot of friends. I've always had a lot of energy. I'm interested in a lot of different things. And in the middle of my life, I'm more and more interested in building a life that really matters to me through hard choices. I can't do everything. I can't spend time with that group if I'm spending time with this group. I can't be present for my 3 teenagers. You only get the inner life of a teenager in passing. And sometimes it's 10:30 p.m. when they're making a second dinner. You know, if I'm asleep because I'm exhausted at 10:30 p.m. because I went out the night before or 4 nights in a row, and I don't get that moment with my kid because I'm lingering in the kitchen late at night, because that's when they linger in the kitchen, I'm going to be disappointed, because that's, you know, my focus. I'm just so invested in my motherhood in that way. And it means that you have to say no to some other things. And honestly, y'all, I thought it would all be a lot easier. Like, it's all going to come to me, and maybe I'm revealing that I've really had a lovely childhood, and I've had a lovely adolescence, and that, you know, my early life. And I think as I've gotten older and into adulthood, you have to take responsibility for the experience you want. And you have to use the 2 most important words in your entire vocabulary, yes and no. And then you live with the consequences of that.
I want to thank you, friend, Paige, for showing up. I want to thank you for all the work you're putting out into the world, and how kind you are and how smart you are. I so appreciate y'all. I so appreciate you. And I'll put this all in the show notes, but you can find Paige on her website, PaigeNolan.com. You can find her on Instagram, Paige Nolan Write. And you can also find her, and I love this. I have done it every year you've done it. I absolutely love your December gratitude. So Paige does this wonderful thing where she does an audio and a written gratitude every day in the month of December. And it is a beautiful way to make space as we move towards the holiday season. So I would encourage everyone to check that out. It is a beautiful moment in a day.
Thank you for that, Julie. 31 days of gratitude. I'll see you, hopefully, and your sister this year.
Yeah,
I love when you do it with me.
Wonderful. It's a great thing to gift to a friend, too. So, all right. Talk soon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Paige.
Take care. Thank you.
Hi, friend.
Hello. Speaking of friends, I love our friendship for sure. And I think this really resonated with me, honestly. I think I'm one of those who has neglected some friendships, hasn't put time into friendships, has had kid friends, right? Like moms of kids type friends. So that whole sentence around it's the intention, it's around leading with love. I think that for me sits home.
I love it. I can't wait to play pickleball with you.
Oh, there we go. I'm loving the pickleball. That's for sure.
There is an expression in Norwegian where I'm from that says that you maintain friendship over dinner, but you build them through experience. And so I love the idea of doing stuff that it had mutual interests and really like continuing to nurture and build relationships by those shared experiences. So that was like a really big note to self for me, that there is a lot of like, oh, let's grab a drink or, oh, let's have dinner. But it's really being intentional about how we spend our time. So that's a big note that I'm going to take with me. And then the other thing which I find fascinating is how some of these themes are becoming through threads in the whole series. Like this idea that, you know, midolescence mirrors adolescence, this idea of holding space for our relationships, whether they're family or their friends, you know, and being, you know, intentional about even in our sexuality and our sex and intimacy. It's about showing up and being in the right space. So
it's all coming together. I think it's, again, that armor cracking, that reemergence, and then just going for it, right? Like whatever it is, just, you know, go for it, go build it, you know, go be it. And bring the right people along with you. I think that's really what it's about. I think it's about losing the things that no longer serve us and keeping and preserving the things that do.
And I look forward to the conversation with Gabby Reese that we're going to have in 2 episodes. And that's when we all are talking about it's not too late, right? It's not too late for any of this. Like we've just begun.
Right.
So I'm gonna heart you again.
Thank you. Double heart.
Thank you for being you, and thank you for showing up for this, and thank you for being my friend.
Of course. Same to you. I'm honored. All right.
Talk soon.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for joining us today, and we can't wait for our next Midlife Truth called Plan Ahead with acclaimed journalist, podcast host of Her Money, and NBC's Today Show financial editor, Jean Shatsky. See you soon.